One of the misconceptions in the study of narcissism is that narcissistic collapse is the outcome of deficient narcissistic supply. That is true, but this is not the only reason or the only cause of narcissistic collapse. Of course, if the narcissist is unable to secure an uninterrupted regular flow of narcissistic supply, problems with self-regulation develop because narcissists rely on external regulation, and because internal regulation is disrupted, there is a problem with shame and other negative effects that go completely awry, out of control, overwhelm the narcissist, take over, and this could culminate even in suicidal ideation. The narcissist clinically becomes a borderline. But this is only one pathway, one trajectory of narcissistic collapse. There's another type of narcissistic collapse that I would like to discuss today, and that is the collapse, the narcissistic collapse that comes about when people refuse to collude with and participate in the shared fantasy. The shared fantasy, remember, is the organizing principle of the narcissist's life and existence. It imbues it with meaning, purpose, and direction. It is inexorable. It is dictated by early childhood experiences and conflicts. And the narcissist is a captive of the shared fantasy as much as anyone else. But the narcissist needs other people to participate in the shared fantasy. And when they reject him, when they refuse to step in, when they refuse to be incorporated into the shared fantasy, the narcissist reacts with narcissistic collapse. Now, before I proceed and before you flood the comment section, half of all narcissists are women, but I'm going to use the male gender pronoun because of Victorian conventions. Yes, I'm that old. The narcissist perceives narcissistic collapse as some kind of injustice. The narcissist feels entitled. He's entitled to special treatment. He's entitled to special outcomes which are incommensurate with the narcissist's efforts. In other words, the narcissist doesn't think that he has to work hard or study hard. Everything should come to him as manna from heaven. He feels entitled. And narcissistic collapse is the denial of this entitlement. You are not going to get narcissistic supply. We are not going to participate in your shared delusional fantasy. It's a denial. And whenever the narcissist faces the denial of his expectations and the lack of catering to his needs, when his needs are unmet, at that point the narcissist perceives the whole situation in terms of a morality play. He splits. He becomes all good, and everyone else is all bad. This is known as a splitting defense mechanism. It's an infantile, primitive defense mechanism. The entitlement, the sense of entitlement, when frustrated, leads, of course, to aggression. But the initial phase of the aggression, as Dollard had observed in 1939, the initial phase of the aggression is an overwhelming sense of having been wronged. Narcissistic collapse is perceived as injustice, and the sense that you have been wrong, that the narcissist has been wrong, leads him to then become angry. So narcissistic collapse perceived as injustice, a violation of the sense of entitlement, trigger in anger and aggression. Sometimes when this anger and aggression cannot be efficaciously applied to the alleged or ostensible transgressors, when the narcissist cannot punish the people who have violated the entitlement, the people who refuse to participate in the shared fantasy, the people who refuse to give him narcissistic supply, the people who mocked him, humiliated him, shamed him, exposed him, and so on and so forth, the people who would not uphold and buttress the grandiose, inflated, fantastic self-concept and self-narrative. All these people need to be punished. They are the subjects of the narcissist's aggression and anger. They are the perpetrators of the injustice, and the injustice needs to be remedied and rectified. But sometimes it is not possible to direct the aggression and anger efficaciously and punitively at the transgressors, at these people. And then the aggression is just there, like a blob of energy. What to do with it? It cannot be externalized. And so it is internalized. The aggression is directed at the narcissist rather than at outsiders. And when the direction, this anger, this diffuse sense of having been wronged, discriminated against, and so on, when all this rage, seething, resentment, bitterness, and so on, when they cannot be applied to others, they are absorbed, they are digested by the narcissist, they are assimilated by the narcissist, and the narcissist then constructs a narrative to explain why he is so angry at himself, why he's aggressing against himself. And the narrative is, I have failed to perform, and my failure renders me unlovable, unworthy of life. Now you can immediately see that this is a reenactment of early childhood relationships, interpersonal relationships, especially with caregivers like the mother, where love had been conditioned on performance. Love was an affect that was dispensed sparingly, and the child had to be performative. The child had to gratify the parents, satisfy their needs and wishes, cater to their unfulfilled dreams and fantasies, and only then the child receive a modicum of love. So it's an impoverished experience, and gradually the child convinces himself or herself that they're not lovable by virtue of who they are. They are lovable by virtue of what they do. And so a failure, for example, to create a shared fantasy and convince other people, convert other people to the cause, this failure is perceived as proof of unlovability. I can be loved only when I perform. I fail to perform, I cannot be loved. I'm unworthy of life, in effect. The internalized aggression results in numerous psychological processes and culminates in depression and self-immolation, self-defeating behaviors, self-harm, sometimes physical, self-trashing, self-destruction, unhealthy behaviors, recklessness, dangerous defiance and contumaciousness, challenging authority, and so on and so forth. So the sequence is: the narcissist needs narcissistic supply. Narcissistic supply is garnered through the imposition of a shared fantasy on other people. If other people refuse to collude and collaborate in this dance macabre, in this theater production, in this movie, the narcissist becomes angry and aggressive because he feels entitled, and not having his needs met feels like some kind of injustice. But this anger and aggression can be either externalized, he can inflict it on other people, the very same people who had undermined and sabotaged his flow of narcissistic supply and have destroyed the shared fantasy. Or, if this is not possible for some reason, this aggression remains there and it is directed inwards. It is internalized, and the narcissist becomes highly self-destructive and also depressed and anxious. The anxiety reflects the innate knowledge that the narcissist is dangerous to himself. There is an unconscious realization that the self-aggression could end very badly, and this creates a lot of anxiety. And if the collapse persists, if the narcissist cannot reverse this course of action, the narcissist starts to dysregulate emotionally and even entertain suicidal ideation. Clinically, as I said, the narcissist enters a borderline state, and his personality devolves into a borderline personality organization. This interplay between narcissism and borderline has been amply described by Otto Kernberg. Now, narcissists are not completely defenseless in the face of these breaks and pauses and deficiencies and interruptions in the flow of supply and in the perpetuation of the shared fantasy. They're not completely defenseless. They have, for example, self-supply, the capacity to supply themselves. I've dealt with it in numerous videos, so I simply advise you to search the channel for self-supply. And self-supply ameliorates the collapse somehow, mitigates it somehow by providing a semblance of narcissistic supply. The narcissist perceives the self-supply as emanating from the outside because the narcissist cannot tell the difference between external and internal objects, and also the narcissist believes that his opinions and judgments are universal. They emanate from some universal source because the narcissist is godlike. So self-supply is experienced internally exactly like supply from external sources, from other people. And it ameliorates the collapse. On the other hand, low-grade supply actually makes the collapse worse. And this is something, again, that most people get wrong, including scholars. When the supply is low-grade, emanates from sources of narcissistic supply which are not appreciated by the narcissist and are not up to scratch or up to it, and when the supply is fake, for example, an attempt to manipulate the narcissist via flattery and so on, the low-grade and fake supply exacerbate the collapse. As the narcissist says to himself, I deserve much more than that. I deserve much better than that. The fact that the only kind of supply I can secure is low grade or fake is a sign of failure. I am failing to obtain high grade supply, so I'm a failure, so I'm unlovable, so I'm unworthy of life. And that perpetuates the borderline dimensions, clinical dimensions and features of the process of narcissistic collapse. So, narcissists prefer to avoid low-grade or fake narcissistic supply altogether. They prefer self-supply to low-grade supply. They prefer self-supply to fake supply. They are looking for high-grade supply, authenticated narcissistic supply, real supply, emanating from sources which they can look up to and respect and even admire, role models in a way. And so the hierarchy of narcissistic supply is high-grade supply, self-supply, and then low-grade or fake supply, which make the collapse even worse. And the narcissist spends an inordinately long stretches of time immersed in seething anger, biting bitterness, and resentment. The narcissist becomes repulsive, obnoxious, aggressive, entitled, demanding, and consequently, of course, hated. The process of trying to extricate himself from the collapse renders the narcissist very hateful, very obnoxious, very disgusting and repulsive. And people want to avoid the narcissist, and many people want to punish the narcissist. People who have been wronged by the narcissist, they become very punitive themselves, and that's a contagion effect in reality. The narcissist converts external objects, other people, into instruments of his own self-destructiveness. Ironically, when the narcissist fails to impose a grandiose shared fantasy, he imposes a self-destructive shared fantasy. When the narcissist fails to convince people that he is amazing, omniscient, brilliant, perfect, a genius, omnipotent, super handsome, and when he fails to convince people in any of this, and there's a systemic collapse of the shared fantasy and a disruption, a massive disruption in the flow of narcissistic supply. At that point, the narcissist construct another shared fantasy, a different one. And that's the shared fantasy of his own demise, of his own disintegration, of his own decay, a twilight of the gods. And he recruits people into this self-destructive shared fantasy by converting them into haters, enemies, hostile to him. And so people think that when they're punishing the narcissist, they're being righteous and virtuous and out of the control of the narcissist. But actually, when you're punishing the narcissist, you're participating in the narcissist's alternative shared fantasy, the shared fantasy of his own grandiose self-destruction, a self-destruction that is ostentatious and for the ages. You're participating in this when you're punishing the narcissist. So people who have been wronged by the narcissist punish the narcissist, and in this way they serve as his instruments and tools in the pursuit of his own, as I said, self-immolation. And they punish the narcissist by denying the narcissist supply, basically. For example, imposing reputational costs on the narcissist, giving him bad reputation, shaming the narcissist, humiliating the narcissist, ignoring the narcissist. Even when the narcissist deserves accolades and recognition for true accomplishments or for good pro-social communal conduct, even then, people deny the accomplishments. They negate the good behavior. They smear the narcissist. They humiliate the narcissist, shame the narcissist, or the most common strategy, completely ignore the narcissist. That drives the narcissist insane. This enhances the narcissist's sense of injustice because the narcissist says, this time I really did something good. This time I really accomplished something amazing. And yet people are ignoring me. They're not giving me my due. They're humiliating and shaming me. And they're spreading rumors about me and so on and so forth. So this is a really vicious cycle. The narcissist starts by confronting a situation where he lacks supply, there's deficient supply, and the shared fantasy is not working. There's a sense of injustice. I'm entitled to all this. Why am I not getting it? It's not just. A sense of injustice, which leads to anger and aggression, which often are externalized and inflicted on other people, but sometimes are internalized and lead to depression and borderline affects and borderline behaviors. And then this alienates people. This drives people away. The narcissist pushes people away. They hate the narcissist. They want to take him down. They want to destroy him. And the only tool, the only weapon people have is the narcissist's constant need for narcissistic supply. So they deny him the supply, and this time intentionally, as a strategy. And that enhances and increases the narcissist's sense of injustice, cosmic injustice, because sometimes narcissists do have real accomplishments. Sometimes they do behave well. But this is lost in the din tantrum of the battle between the narcissist and all humanity. Narcissist is trying to coerce humanity into accepting him as this messianic genius figure. And humanity wouldn't comply. Humanity pushes back or mocks and ridicules the narcissist, exposes and shames him or whatever, and mostly humanity ignores the narcissist. And the sense of injustice becomes entrenched. And some of this sense of injustice is justified, really. And this real injustice and unjust, abusive treatment at the hands of other people prods the narcissist even further into the state of what I call furious collapse. And there is a collapse spiral. The more angry the narcissist is, the more abrasive, the more aggressive, the more furious, the more enraged, the less inhibited, the less controlled, the more the narcissist is conflict-prone, antagonistic, contemptuous, the more the narcissist is himself obnoxious, the more people hate the narcissist. They mistreat the narcissist. They abuse the narcissist as a punishment, which then enhances the narcissist's sense of injustice, and he becomes even more aggressive, even more obnoxious, even more punitive, even more contemptuous, and the cycle continues indefinitely to the point that the narcissist may become a complete outcast and a hate figure. This furious collapse, the collapse spiral, is a series of ritualized, orchestrated moves and countermoves by the narcissist and his environment. The narcissist lashes out at people he perceives as tormentors or bias, prejudice, discriminating people, or bad people, or malevolent people, or evil people, or enemies, or he lashes out. He tries to modify their behaviors or eliminate them altogether. And he fails, of course, and then he internalizes the aggression for having failed. He hates himself, and then he hates other people for hating himself. He says, they made me hate myself. He's angry at them. And then he again lashes out. And it's an endless process, endless cycle. So why does narcissistic supply end? Why does it come to a point where it fades and vanishes? Because sooner or later the narcissist finds a winning strategy to obtain narcissistic supply by changing usually the pathological narcissistic space, moving to another physical location, a new church, a new pub, a new family, a new workplace, something new. And then he starts from zero and is able to obtain supply because he knows he's sometimes charming, sometimes useful, sometimes always manipulative, and ostentatiously pro-social, helpful, do-gooder, you name it. Numerous strategies. Somehow the narcissist succeeds to resuscitate the flow, the uninterrupted flow of narcissistic supply, and this terminates the collapse phase. And the narcissist's grandiosity and other cognitive distortions, they're fully restored. Narcissist is back to his old self. He reverts to form, and the cycle starts again. But as you see, the collapse process is very nuanced, multifaceted, not as simple as, oh, the narcissist doesn't have supply, so he's sulking, or oh, the narcissist doesn't have supply, so he's a bit borderline, he's emotionally dysregulated. No, it's not as simple as that. There are mechanisms within mechanisms, cogs within wheels, and it's a complex phenomenon, and the narcissist is trying to manage it as best he can, because there are transformations and manifestations and expressions of aggression which are sometimes externalized, sometimes internalized. Sometimes he uses other people to destroy himself. Sometimes he uses himself to destroy other people. And it's very difficult sometimes to tell the subtleties and the nuances and the differences in behavior and what is the aim or what is the goal and where all this is going. And the collapse phase is highly chaotic because it's truly the absence of an organizing principle. Everything the narcissist believed in, his own inflated, fantastic, grandiose self-concept, the flow of narcissistic supply and the sources of supply, the shared fantasy and its ultimate destination or destiny, all these are gone, absolutely gone. All the defenses crumble in a process of decompensation. The narcissist is faced with himself. He's alone with himself, facing himself in the mirror, witness to his own shame, fallibility, and, like the Wizard of Oz, his minute, small stature. And he cannot tolerate this. It's very threatening. It usually results in mortification if it is very abrupt. But even if it doesn't result in mortification, it's still very threatening. And the narcissist is hell-bent simultaneously on penalizing the people who brought him into this state, on the one hand, and on finding new converts, new participants, new victims, if you wish, new sources of narcissistic supply. Both these missions, both these tasks are very compulsive, and they are often irreconcilable, which renders the collapse state a dissonant state, which then gives rise to a heightened anxiety, and to which is coupled with the depression, anxiety and depression. It's a bad time for the narcissist. The collapse is much, much worse in the wake of narcissistic mortification. It could be life-threatening. But even normal collapse, standard collapse, and narcissists go through collapse numerous times in the lifespan. But even a normal collapse is a very harrowing period and challenges all the narcissist's resources. And all of them recover, all of them regain their totally paracosmic self-concept, totally, fictitious self-concept. But so it's getting more difficult with age. It's the memories of previous collapses and the fact that collapses are much more frequent as the narcissist ages could put together lead to internal mortification. Like the realization that that's it. I'm out of resources. I'm out of strategies and stratagems. I, the narcissist, don't know what to do anymore. Don't know where to go. Don't know what's next. And then there is serious risk of a borderline devolution or deterioration, including a serious contemplation of suicide.